I feel the need for speed. But here's the real question. Have you actually seen Top Gun, or have you only seen what the camera wanted you to see? Top Gun wasn't just a high-flying action film about elite pilots. It was a carefully engineered illusion where real danger, studio control, and last-second decisions shaped every frame you remember. Jets roared past cameras with no margin for error. Scripts were rewritten under military oversight. Rivalries were sharpened in the editing room. What looked effortless on screen was anything but. This is cinema secrets you missed in Top Gun. The hidden choices, buried compromises, and behind-the-scenes realities audiences never noticed while watching. And stay with me to the end, because the final reveal uncovers a quiet decision that changed the film's legacy forever. Lock in, let's break it down. Fact 1. The Navy didn't just help, it watched everything. What audiences didn't know is that Top Gun was made under constant military supervision. This wasn't creative freedom, it was collaboration with conditions. Every script draft went through Navy approval. Dialogue was adjusted, scenes were reshaped. Anything that made pilots look reckless was softened. Anything that showed discipline was amplified. It wasn't propaganda, it was image control. Producers gained access to aircraft, carriers, and training facilities, but only by agreeing to rules that shaped the story's tone. Not total fiction, but not total honesty either. Top Gun didn't just depict elite aviation culture, it was filtered through it, and that balance would define everything that followed. Fact 2. Actors weren't acting in the air. Those cockpit shots weren't fake. The actors trained in real aircraft, real G-forces, real fear. No green screens, no simulated motion. What audiences didn't know is that several performers struggled physically during flights. Faces strained, vision narrowed, bodies pushed past comfort. Director Tony Scott insisted on realism. Cameras were bolted into cockpits. Timing had to be perfect because jets don't wait for second takes. It wasn't movie magic, it was endurance. Every close-up you see mid-flight is a human body fighting physics. That tension isn't acting, it's survival under pressure. Fact 3. The famous volleyball scene almost didn't exist. That iconic beach scene, it nearly vanished. Studio executives questioned its purpose. It didn't advance the plot, it slowed pacing, it broke tone. But Tony Scott saw something else. Not story, but mythology. The scene wasn't about competition. It was about identity. It showed pilots as modern icons: sun, sweat, confidence, camaraderie. What audiences didn't know is that this moment helped cement Top Gun as a cultural symbol, not just a military film. It wasn't necessary, it was defining. And once it was cut together, no one dared remove it. Fact 4. Call signs were carefully engineered. Maverick sounds rebellious. Iceman sounds controlled. That wasn't accidental. Call signs were chosen to instantly communicate personality without exposition. The film moves fast, there's no time to explain who these pilots are. What audiences didn't know is that real call signs are often embarrassing or ironic. The movie rejected that realism. This wasn't documentation, it was mythology building. Every name functioned like shorthand: hero, rival, mentor. Simple, sharp, memorable. And it worked so well that many people assume real pilots choose names this way. They don't. Fact 5. The aerial footage changed how action films looked. Before Top Gun, air combat was distant and mechanical. After it, everything changed. Tony Scott used aggressive camera angles, fast cuts, and sun-drenched visuals to make speed feel emotional, not technical. What audiences didn't know is how difficult this was to coordinate. Jets move faster than camera rigs were designed to handle. Shots had to be planned down to seconds. One mistake meant lost footage and millions wasted. This wasn't coverage. It was choreography at Mach speed, and Hollywood would copy it for decades. Fact 6. Kelly McGillis was cast against expectations. At the time, Kelly McGillis didn't fit the typical blockbuster mold. She wasn't styled as a passive presence. She was older than the lead, confident, grounded. What audiences didn't know is that her casting helped stabilize the film's energy. Amid jets and bravado, she brought stillness. The dynamic wasn't domination, it was balance. That choice gave the story emotional weight and helped it appeal beyond action fans. It wasn't flashy casting, it was smart casting. Fact 7. Training sequences were real training. Those classroom scenes weren't just exposition. They mirrored actual Navy instruction methods. Terminology was precise, procedures accurate. What audiences didn't know is that advisors corrected actors' constantly posture, phrasing, even how they stood. Mistakes weren't tolerated. It wasn't about realism for critics. It was about credibility for professionals. Pilots watched this movie, and the filmmakers knew it. Fact 8. The carrier scenes were shot under extreme limits. Aircraft carriers are not film sets. They're active military environments with tight schedules and zero tolerance for delays. What audiences didn't know is that the crew had limited windows to shoot. Planes had priority. Safety came first. Miss a cue? You waited hours or lost the shot entirely. This wasn't controlled chaos. It was borrowed time. Every usable frame came from precision under pressure. Fact 9. The rivalry was built through editing. The tension between Maverick and Iceman feels constant, but it wasn't filmed that way. What audiences didn't know is how much of that rivalry was shaped in post-production. Reaction shots, music cues, strategic pacing. Not conflict, but construction. Editing sharpened glances into challenges, silence into hostility. It wasn't improvised drama, it was sculpted tension, and it works because it feels invisible. Fact 10. The soundtrack was a strategic weapon. Before we go further, go ahead and like and subscribe because this next stretch reveals how Top Gun quietly rewrote Hollywood's strategy. The soundtrack wasn't background music. It was branding. Every track was chosen to amplify adrenaline, romance, and momentum. What audiences didn't know is how tightly music was synchronized with image. Beats matched cuts. Choruses hit visual peaks. It wasn't atmosphere. It was propulsion, and it turned the film into an experience, not just a story. Fact 11, safety margins were slimmer than you think. Flying sequences carried real risk. Jets passed closer to cameras than modern standards allow. Weather changed unpredictably. What audiences didn't know is that contingency planning was constant. Crews adjusted daily, sometimes hourly. No margin for panic, only preparation. This wasn't reckless filmmaking. It was controlled exposure to danger, and everyone involved understood the stakes. Fact 12. The film rebranded the action hero. Maverick isn't invincible. He's emotional, impulsive, uncertain. What audiences didn't know is how unusual this was for the era. Action heroes were often stoic and unshaken. Top Gun made vulnerability part of strength. Not perfection, but growth. That shift influenced countless films that followed. Fact 13. Dialogue was constantly reworked. Lines changed daily, not because of indecision, but because of tone. What audiences didn't know is how much effort went into balancing authenticity with clarity. Too technical, and viewers would disconnect. Too simple, and credibility suffered. Every line walked a tightrope. Not jargon, not simplification, precision. Fact 14. The film quietly boosted real-world enrollment. After release, military recruitment offices reported dramatic increases in interest. What audiences didn't know is that Top Gun became an unofficial ambassador, not through messaging but aspiration. The film didn't explain duty, it made it look meaningful. That impact was unplanned but undeniable. Fact 15. Tony Scott's visual style was the real star. Scott treated aircraft like characters. Light reflected off metal, heat shimmered, engines roared like dialogue. What audiences didn't know is how intentional this was. He wanted machines to feel alive, not tools but forces. That philosophy defined his career and action cinema afterward. And fact 16, the film hit its emotional core in plain sight. Beneath the spectacle is a story about loss and responsibility, but it never stops to explain it. What audiences didn't know is how restraint strengthens impact. No speeches, no overt lessons, just consequences. And that subtlety gives the film longevity. Fact 17. Editing saved the third act. Early cuts struggled with pacing. What audiences didn't know is how much restructuring happened late in production. Scenes moved, emphasis shifted. Not rewriting, but refining. The final act works because it was rebuilt, not reshot. Fact 18. The movie defined 1980s confidence. Top Gun became a cultural shorthand. Confidence, precision, cool under pressure. What audiences didn't know is how deeply it shaped fashion, language, and attitude. It wasn't a reflection of the decade. It helped define it. Fact 19. Critics missed its craft. Early reviews focused on surface style. What audiences didn't know is how carefully engineered that style was. This wasn't excess. It was discipline disguised as flash, and time proved that. Fact 20. Its legacy outlasted its era. Few films maintain relevance across generations. Top Gun did. Not because of nostalgia, but because it understands spectacle as storytelling. Bonus fact. The sequel took decades because they refused to repeat themselves. What audiences didn't know is that a follow-up was discussed for years and rejected repeatedly. The reason? They wouldn't make it unless it meant something new. That restraint preserved the original's power. Final reflection. Top Gun wasn't just fast jets and famous lines. It was risk disguised as confidence, control forged inside chaos. And that's why, decades later, it still soars. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit like, subscribe, and comment with the next film you want uncovered, because some movies don't just entertain. They leave contrails across history.